From a rider's perspective, the fact that those, it's almost like the pit crew when people are racing the vehicles. You know what I mean? Like they're
Yeah.
the real heroes behind everything. When you think about the fact that they have to, they got to wash, inspect, 1,000 bikes, bro.
Welcome to Spoken Soul, home of the essential athlete. I'm Terrance, here with Anthony as always. And today we want to talk about one of the premier, if not the premier, cycling event that happens every year. And it just finished up roughly about, I want to say, 2 to 3 weeks ago. And of course, that is the Tour de France. Now, after the Tour de France, they do the Tour de Femmes. That's the women's version. That just finished, I want to say, on August 9th. So I watched a lot more of the tour this year than I have in the past, and as years go on, I'm finding that I'm watching more and more. And when I first started to watch it, there was a lot of confusion there outside of the fact that it was riding some nice bikes. The elevation on some of those climbs was ridiculous, but I didn't, outside of, basic knowledge, I didn't have a real understanding of what was going on in the tour until this year. I knew that it was coming up, and I wanted to have a better understanding. So what I want to do with this episode is I want to have a conversation, and I want to, for the casual viewer, right, give them a sense of what a lot of that stuff means and just cover the not so much the technical aspect of it, but from a knowledge perspective, provide some knowledge on what it is, and that sort of stuff. So I'm gonna start by asking you. I'm gonna give you this little quiz here.
Yeah.
How much of the tour do you, from a fan perspective, understand or know about?
Well, I'll just start out, and maybe they'll sponsor us at some point, but
You be looking for them sponsorships. We ain't there
that's right.
yet.
I still want sponsors, but from a riding perspective,
Speaking of non-sponsors, let's get that out of there.
yeah, Gatorade, we take your sponsorship too. We run and ride. But, from a rider perspective, my knowledge of the Tour de France, like I knew a little bit about it, obviously, from, some of the American legends that used to ride. So, you hear about that the one time a year. But for me, my knowledge has come from Zwift. Because we train with Zwift, so that's kind of pulled me in. And I haven't watched a lot of it, but like I'll watch clips, but to learn like little different things based on what's going on in that virtual world. So that's how I know certain things. Like when we talk about like the King of the Mountains, and you see the different colored jerseys and those type of things, which we'll talk about. That's how I learned about the Tour de France, basically from that virtual environment.
And you know what? That's a great marketing ploy by Zwift
Amazing.
because the lead up to the tour, all the different pieces of gear that you can get based off riding certain routes, the what is it? The
XPs that you
yeah,
get to.
I'm trying to think of, there's one climb that, I try to do at least once every 3 or 4 months. It's Alp de Zwift, but it's modeled after, I think it's called Alp de Huez. It's one of the stages
Yep.
in the actual tour, but they do a phenomenal job from a marketing perspective
Phenomenal.
to kind of get hype behind.
And give that real world experience too.
Yeah.
When I just
Well,
finished.
real world is debatable, but yeah.
No. But in a sense, from a virtual perspective.
Yeah, yes.
I mean, if again, it's no different than the video gamers that play, FIFA or
Yeah.
NBA or whatever else. You get a chance to kind of live that from a virtual perspective. And myself, I just finished. I think it was the Femmes one where was the female one that they have that particular
Yeah,
one
yeah.
in
Tour de Femmes.
Tour
The
de
MES
Femmes.
is
Yes.
apparently the last MES is silent.
Yes, and I got the jersey, but my goal was I was trying to write, I wanted to win the jersey, but
Yeah.
they had the routes that were emulating those different things that they would have had. So I think that's incredible. Again, especially from a motivation perspective in that game, but also to say, okay, what's that connected to? And they give a little background with that. So I think that's phenomenal.
And that's why I wanted to do a basic what the tour is from a fan perspective. When I say, well, I don't necessarily want to say fan, but from a cyclist perspective who may not be a fan or may not watch the actual tour or get into the deep technical aspects or even know who Tadej Pogacar is or a lot of Del Toro or a lot of those other riders, right? It's because the fanfare from just whether you do Zwift or one of the other platforms, there's such a buildup.
Yeah.
And if you enjoy cycling, it's a really cool event to actually watch. I mentioned this earlier. The tour starts off with this huge parade, which prior to this year, I had no knowledge of. It's a huge parade. From a fan perspective, here's what you gotta respect. 10 to 12 million people out there on the actual road. Now, I'll say this. My understanding is half of those people are out there for the parade. And the parade, there's a lot. Listen, you're Mr. Swag. There's a lot of swag that's given out at that actual parade.
Yeah.
We're talking millions and millions of, objects, pieces of swag, t-shirts,
Whatever.
keychains,
Keychains, yeah.
hats, all that stuff given out. But I wanted to at least cover what the tour is, and not so much the tour from 2026, but what the tour is, so the casual cyclist might say, hey, you know what, that's interesting. Or I might, you know what I mean, just to build it up. And before I get too deep into that, you mentioned FIFA. It's not running, it's not cycling, but we just hosted the World Cup.
Yeah, that's huge.
We hosted the World Cup, and first off, shout out to Spain. Shout out to Spain, winners of the World Cup. Portugal, we got to get there. Portugal, we got to get there. But the World Cup had a number of positive impacts from my perspective, right? The environment that we're currently in, when you look at us from the outside looking in, we're a hot mess. But to see all the people who came from other countries then reflect on their experience coming here to America, and how a lot of the stuff that, whether it was from the media, whether it was from just stuff that they heard, to see a lot of that stuff debunked, to see their experience and them talking about how much of a great time it was to actually be a part of this, and to be able to go down, and I don't know if you had a chance to do this, but they had the watch parties downtown.
Yeah, I didn't go to watch parties, but I heard about them.
We went down, and they had a couple of them were during the day, and we went down to a couple of the watch parties. Ayla was able to go to Portugal, had a little store set up. She went down there and got some jerseys. They were much more expensive than when I was in Portugal and got them. But that was just such an experience that I just wanted to mention that. And also, 2030, the World Cup is going to be in Portugal, and I'm going to be there in 2030. But anyway, shifting gears, going back from an experience perspective, I have to imagine to be one of those 10 to 12 million people out there, it shows how much they're into that actual sport. And the other part about that is, and I don't know if people understand this or people realize this, the Tour de France doesn't start in France. And the reason why they do that is, it ends in Paris, so it ends in France. Yeah. But to build up international hype, it starts outside. This year it started in Spain. I'm not sure if it starts in Spain every year, but just to get all those fans excited and to get that fan base to just buy in, it really is an international event when it comes to that thing. So,
And I think too, it shows how sport connects people.
yeah,
You
100%.
have all those different countries, that are involved, cyclists from different countries, and that they do the rides in different countries. That shows how the cycling community becomes collective, and that's really good for the cycling community because, as a whole, it's known to not really be that inclusive. So.
Yeah, from a cycling perspective. So let's talk about, well, not even let's talk about. One of the things that I think most people do understand about the tour is the yellow jersey, right? And the yellow jersey goes to the person who, at the end of each stage, has the lowest time. I'm pretty sure it is the lowest time throughout the actual stages. But there are also a number of other jerseys.
I know. Listen, I'm gonna say I love the push the button jersey.
The push the button jersey. So I'm assuming you're talking about the green jersey. The green jersey. Listen, and the thing about it was interesting this year because, like I said, there were 21 stages. There are about 23 teams, and there's about 8 people on each team. And that's the other thing. Going back a few years, I knew that there were teams, but I didn't really know how the teams operate. Yeah. But what I will say is this. What I kept watching for was who had the green jersey this year. I knew who had the yellow jersey, right? But prior to this year, I didn't know about the polka dot jersey. And I didn't know about the white jersey.
Hills pay the bills. That must be that's probably your favorite jersey.
Hills pay the bills.
Hills pay the bills for the best climber.
Listen, again, the elevation on these, it's wild to imagine that. Okay, so there are 21 stages. You take the sprints out for a second. They're part of the race, but the amount of the gain, the elevation, and just the amount of time that they're in the saddle, you got to take your hat off to that. I mean, hills pay the bills, but I couldn't do that. Again, I'm not a world-class cyclist, but
the power, the power, the resilience, the focus, to be able to focus. I mean, hell, I'm never gonna ride Tour de France, but when we get on those hills and the inclines are, 600, 700, 800, and sometimes we're like, this is bullshit.
Let me tell you what was blowing me away. As I was watching, I don't remember what stage it was. The stage is not important. What's important was the speed at which they were climbing. When I say 22, 23, 25 miles per hour,
wow,
it's ridiculous. I'm talking about on a climb. On portions of the actual climb, that's ridiculous.
Hell, I have a hard time sometimes getting there on a flat.
Yeah, and I digress a little bit because again, I'm trying to provide a basic knowledge of the tour and how it works.
Yeah. But that's a good comparison.
Oh yeah.
When you talk about how, again on that level, like that's a high level, and I think that's probably what draws in some of the casual fans and fans that happen to be cyclists.
Yeah, that comparison.
Because they put in the work. So you can kind of be like, okay, I've been out there and I've been in the trenches that have done that and have rode, so I can respect that. It's almost like a boxer who, they know what it's like to knock someone out. And if they've gotten knocked out, they know what it's like. So you can respect that when you've actually seen it and seen the greatness of it.
Yeah. So going back to the jerseys for a second. Just so, obviously, at the end of all the stages, the person with the lowest time accumulation across all those stages is the winner of the tour from the perspective of the yellow jersey, and that's the all around. Yep. The green jersey is that push the button jersey. It's the person who has accumulated the most points during the sprint. I want to say, I believe that's a point. Let me look at my notes. Let me look
It's
at my
the
notes.
best sprinter. The best sprinter with the most
Yeah, most
accumulated
cumulative points. And then the polka dot jersey. You know, every time I say polka, actually, you know what the funny thing is? Every time I see the polka dot jersey, I think of Kwame.
Yeah. with the Gumby. Oh,
Yeah.
man.
But the polka dot jersey
Hold on,
goes.
did you have those pants?
I didn't have the pants.
I had some of them pants.
I had I did see, and I didn't have hammer pants either. I digress. I did have some checkered joints. I
Checkered
didn't have the
joints?
polka
Okay.
dot ones. I had the checkered joints. But the polka dot jersey is for the person who has accumulated the most points from a climb perspective, and you know they have these. I guess I don't want to call them finish lines, but they have these contraptions where you know what I mean. You go through, you get points based on you're the first person to reach a certain particular portion of that actual.
So like the
climb.
checkpoints, which again,
checkpoints.
which I go back to Zwift. Zwift does an excellent job because they emulate those things.
Yeah.
You know, and kind of to give you that experience that you may or may not, be able to have. And then the white jersey.
The white jersey is something that I wasn't aware of, but the white jersey goes to the best overall performance in the younger group, and I don't know if that is
Like 25 years old, 25 or younger.
25 or younger. Yeah.
And that's a nice one too. It's kind of like giving respect to it's like the rookie of the year.
Yeah, yeah.
Or the rookie of the month or whatever it may be. And that's incredible too because it kind of encourages, again, from a perspective of the people that are looking at it.
Yeah.
If they know what that is, and not just the casual person who's into it. When you see those jerseys, that's good marketing for the up and coming cyclists that may be coming up in the community. So again, from a marketing perspective, it's and a hype perspective. They do a good job pulling that all together, and looking at the different aspects of cyclists. So and again, for me, I haven't always paid attention to that, but looking at it from that perspective, it gives a little bit for everything.
Yeah, that recognition is. I think it's cool to get recognition, particularly when you're younger competitive, and you're coming in, and obviously, when you're a competitor, you want to win, but to get recognition because sometimes you go in and you're working with the big boys,
and experienced people, and they give you those veteran, those veteran hacks that you don't necessarily have yet. That's definitely a good thing.
And it's cool to have something to represent to show that, hey, this is the new kid. You know what I mean? I'm coming up. I got my white jersey. Yeah. I'm coming up.
A new kid on the block, watch out for me.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I gained knowledge on, and I credit a portion of that to Skip. There's only one winner when you start talking about Tour de France. But not one person wins on their own. And the whole concept of the team, I didn't really grasp. I understood that you have some people who are working, so the person that they're working for they're putting them in a better position to actually win. And Skip, when we would ride with Skip would always used to say that, he was the domestique. And I didn't know what he was actually talking about until, this year and a little last year, really looking at what the makeup of the teams were and finding out that you have the GC, which is, general, what is that? The general
contender?
Yeah. I knew about sprinters and what I knew from Skip about the actual domestiques. But knowing what their actual roles are, that GC is that person who probably has the best shot of actually, winning the actual tour. And Skip, when I think of Skip, when you think of Skip always says, get on my wheel.
Yep. And
just get behind me, get on my wheel.
You had me just thinking about that. And it's funny how, when we talk about how sport, blends over into life, that whole persona, not just when we ride, but even outside of that with him, with what he does, whether it's get on my wheel or whether it's, I remember one time when we were riding the Coventry, that Coventry ride where we go off left and we go up that hill, and it was you, him, Marianne, me, and Court.
Yeah.
And I think there was a couple hills we were struggling, and he was like tapping us to like kind of get us up, and he lives in that persona, and I think it's just amazing how the sport piece goes over into regular recreational and outside of that with who he is as a person too, where he's that person who's always trying to uplift people.
And it's funny that you mention that, because that gave me a better understanding of the actual role. Skip gave me a better understanding of the role. To say it is one thing, right? And when you see his actions are his actions because he's Skip.
Yeah.
But then as doing the research and understanding what that role is, that role is Skip.
And it matches him perfectly too.
Exactly. and so I just found that I found it ironic that as I started to look at that and to understand it, it was Skip. And when I say it was Skip, not saying it's who Skip is. It's how he actually acts. So if you go back years ago when we first started riding with him, he was doing that stuff then.
Yeah.
And he put his hand on you, man, and he starts put, or he'd be leading me like, get on my wheel, and he has that, Skip. He's a big dude. He has that big wide body, and he's like, listen, I'm gonna take all that. I'm gonna take all that win, and you just.
And almost the person who's like like the teacher too. And I don't know a lot about that, but the person who is giving knowledge and that person who's sacrificing themselves for the greater good of the team.
Yes.
And I don't know if that clearly.
Well, I mean,
the
the thing about it is this, right? So you have 8 people on the team. You have the GC, you have sprinters, and you have the domestiques.
Yep.
They're all working together for that one person. So they are sacrificing themselves to put that person in a better position to win. And you got to think about it. So a couple of things happened in this tour. I think there were 2 stages where a teammate of Tadej Pogacar, Del Toro, a young kid, where Pogacar showed his appreciation for the sacrifices by gifting him, I believe it was 2 stage wins. Right?
Wow.
Yep. It was a situation where, again, the team works to put themselves in the position. You have 2 to 3. What typically ends up happening is as you come to the end of a stage, you have 2 to 3 members of a team who are there working, and they're working to make sure that you get in the best position. And to show his appreciation, he, for lack of, Del Toro was phenomenal during this tour, and that's not to say he didn't earn those 2 stage wins, but Pogacar could have easily taken those stage wins. But again, it's a testament to how that team operates. It's a testament to someone being appreciative of the fact that, listen, these guys or these members of my team, they sacrifice themselves to actually put me in the best possible position so I can come out on top.
Yeah, we can all win together. I think that's one of the things. And I, again, for me as a cyclist, because obviously we ride, as a group collectively, it gives me a lot of appreciation. Not that we ride the Tour de France, but on how we all support each other to make sure that we, not on the stages itself, but from a local, regular perspective, that we make sure that we all start and that we end together.
Here's what I like about all of this, and here's what I feel. Knowledge is power. I know that's cliche, but the more information you have, right, the more informed you are, it fuels your perspective, or it provides you information that you can have a different perspective. We've cycled with people before who, if from the outside looking in, cycling is an individual sport. And to an extent,
No, it is.
It is. But there's a team aspect of what happens from even any cycling event. Because again, ultimately, you work as a team to try to put your team's best rider in position to actually win. When you look at it from that perspective, my perception has changed a little bit, right? It for the better, because again, we've had conversations where I say, well, I see certain things in running that I don't see in cycling. This has allowed me to have a better appreciation, not just for the sport of cycling, but for the joy of cycling, right?
Yes, and I think as a segue to that too, when you think about some of the logistics of it, you and I were talking before we came on camera about that, how, you know, similar to NASCAR and all those other things, sports where there's a lot of behind the scenes people who are the unsung heroes.
Yeah.
The people that, again, like all we see is the people show up and they get in the car and it's the driver, I'm driving.
Yeah, speak up, Lil.
Okay, all right. And all you see is the driver, but those people that are behind the scenes, that are washing the bikes, that are tuning the bikes up, even down to the people who, are the support teams out there, where if someone gets a flat tire and they swap those tires out in like 10 seconds, like that's phenomenal. I mean, that's a skill in of itself, to be able to support that team. And sometimes, it's those unsung heroes that obviously are helping and assisting for those wins that you never really hear about.
You have to think about what it takes. So if you watch a stage, you'll see the car with the mechanics, with the extra bikes on it. But you got to think about what happens behind the scene, as you said. My understanding is that for each, I'm trying to remember if it was each rider or each team. I mean, they're dealing with hundreds of bikes, right? And during the day, you see the race, you see the ride, and you mention it. You don't see what happens behind. You don't see and in a relatively short period of time. You got to imagine that, first off, the Tour is a huge race. You have to be prepared from a mechanic, from whoever else is on the team. You got to be prepared for almost anything. And that's a lot of stuff that, people don't see or people don't understand. And obviously, we know what goes into, well, let me rephrase this. We know how important it is to have our bikes maintained, right? And we're not out there doing what they're doing. So
and you know how long it takes to change a tire, because you're the main tire guy. You're like our road mechanic, so you have a great understanding of that. In terms of, I can recall a couple of times when I think it was it may have been, his name was Nico, when Nico I think caught two flats. And you swapped his tire, his flats, and changed his flats. So imagine someone being able to do that like in 10 seconds.
Yeah, and on top of that, you got to be prepared for
crashes.
You got to be
mechanical
prepared for
fails, chain snapping. Like you said, you just got to be ready for anything. And again, I think that that part of it is very intriguing. And even us having this conversation today as someone who rides and as a casual rider, I will say that it's definitely piqued my curiosity of, what goes on, and, although I may not be interested in watching the stages, I would love to see, maybe from a Tour de France perspective, that they maybe interview some of the people behind the scenes. Like, I would love to know what the day in the life of a mechanic though looks like, who does that, or someone who drives in the vehicle. Because again, they're kind of like those people that like you never see their faces and hear their names, but they're kind of like the foundation of of those teams.
I'd have to imagine you'd get some crazy stories.
Yes,
you get some crazy stories. And again, here's the other thing. I think the challenge for me is, as much as I watched the event this year, it's an event that's outside of the U.S.
Yeah.
So from a coverage perspective, there is some coverage, but there might be some coverage, or there might be some behind the scenes interviews.
I'm Googling that. When we finish this episode today, I'm gonna Google that to see, because I would love to see that perspective.
Yeah.
From, and like you said, like some crazy stories about things that have happened. And again, from the perspective of, and you're not just talking about regular, like my bike. Well, not you. You have the very expensive bikes.
Nah, listen. I'm gonna tell you this. My bikes are cheap compared to what they use.
No, I know.
These tours.
I'm just busting you, but when you think about the level of those bikes too, that the things in the the different components and things that they have, and just the craftsmanship that it would take to make sure that they're operable and be able to repair those.
This is why I don't get why more people, well, I can't say more people, because there's a ton of people who watch the tour. There are two things that I really enjoy about, I really enjoy watching the race, because there's a mastery, that's the word?
Yeah,
There's a mastery there that when you see them ride, you'll understand it when you see it, right? You'll understand that, and then at the same time, you also will get the appreciation for there's levels to this. And what I mean by that is, okay, you start watching a race and then you see a breakaway, right? And you see a group that actually breaks away. And when that breakaway happens, it's a breakaway.
Yeah.
The cream rises to the top.
Yeah.
And you'll look and what's amazing is you can look to see they're moving. They're going. Listen, what are you doing right now? 40 miles an hour?
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So since we are Spoken Soul, so is there a comparison or an equivalent from that breakaway from a riding perspective that you've seen in running?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because you haven't thinking about that.
Christian. So if you go back 2 years ago, we marshaled, I want to say it was Jamestown. Mm-hmm. It was Jamestown. As a matter of fact, it was Jamestown. And I told you about this guy who he was in the lead. It started out just, you know how that race starts. The race starts, you have some elites who are going to pull off in the beginning, and you have a pack of them. Yep. And it's just, okay, well, that pack, as time goes on, it thins out. But you normally have like 3 to 4 people who are, right there together, right? Christian had went out. I told you the story. Yep. He had went out with his friends the night before.
Yeah.
It was his first time running to Jamestown, and he had a long night. You would never notice because there was no one else in sight. When I think about last year we did the Providence, right? And I likened this to the Providence, but this happened before, so this is the first time I actually seen it. And I say the Jamestown because, Jamestown notoriously has some hills where Providence is relatively flat. But if you remember last year, we did the Providence. You stayed with the guy, the lead runner, the marathon.
Yeah.
Okay? He opened up first, there was 2. It wasn't 2 for long.
Yeah.
But there was 2. He opened up such a sizable gap between him and the second place person who I stayed with, right? But that second place person had opened up such a gap between him and everyone else that it allowed me the opportunity to go back to find the group of people who was behind him, and then go back and find the first female who was behind all of them. So typically the breakaways on the tour, it's not really a solo person, right? Mm-hmm. It'll be a group, right? And because the stages aren't like this unless you're talking about time trials or some of the sprints. It's a race and it's long. But when that breakaway happens, what you got to understand is you break away from that peloton. Mm-hmm. Once that gap is there, now it's one of those things where it's not as easy to make that up, right? And that group who breaks off, they're putting in work and they're staying together because even if they're not on the same team, they got to work off each other, right?
Correct, yeah.
Because they don't want the peloton to catch back up, because now once the peloton catch back up, that's much more competition that you actually have. So I likened some of those breakaways to a couple of those races where you have a pack of individuals, and again, we're talking marathon at this point, right? We're not talking about a 5K, because there's much more strategy there, right? And that's another part of it. You got to have that actual strategy, because it's not, it's a long race. So I likened it to that situation where when that happens, from a strategy perspective, in that case with Christian, his strategy was keep running. And he that was the thing. He talked for a good portion of the actual race, and there was no one in sight. But when you start talking about any cycling race, part of you have to have a strategy when something like that happens, because there's a danger to, if you don't know, we're going to get into this, but we've talked about this briefly. Sometimes the crowd or the masses can pull you out of who you are in a race, right?
Very true.
And
Very true.
you have to be mindful of who you are, but you also have to have a strategy to keep yourself from overexerting yourself
Overexerting,
too soon
Too soon,
and
yeah.
ending up
Boinking.
boinking.
That's
Right?
another thing, yeah.
So, but just to see the mastery, to see the level. I mean, it's a
Because it's a bunch of things too. You know, when I look at that, you know, it's not just, you know, it's, you know, what you have from the perspective of your bike, you know, what you have from a perspective as your riding, you know, as far as your athleticism, you know, also, like you said, your strategy, because you can be the most athletic person in the world, but if you don't have strategy, you know, and planning, you know, a combination of those things is what I would say would take to win that. And like you said, looking at that from a different level, you know, and not just, you know, you're out there and you're riding 30 miles and, you know, you're going to ride 22 miles an hour, but like you're out there and, you know, you're doing that on multiple stages of multiple days.
And
like that is, and, you know, for me as an endurance athlete, that is, you know, that's a mind-boggling thing.
and keep this in mind. 21 stages, I believe there's 2 rest days.
Wow.
2 rest days. So as a whole, here's what's appealing to me as a cycling fan when we start talking about the tour. Something that I never knew about originally, that whole parade thing.
I would go on a parade.
The parade thing, the energy, again, you can feel. I've been watching, you know, so we're coming off. It might still be going on, but track events, championships has been happening. I've been watching some of those, and track is different from road racing from the perspective of on the track. It's just, you know,
It's just the athletes.
just the athletes. They're on the track, right? And you don't get a sense of the energy because you have this huge track, and then you have these stands.
Yeah.
Road races, depending on the road race, you get some of that, right? Because you have some people who are out there that are cheering the people on the side. You know what I mean? We talked about Boston. We talked about, you know, some of the iconic places where, you know, whether it's the students or whoever, you get the people out there. When you look, even through the TV, when you look at the Tour de France, and you see one of the cool things I saw, I wish I could remember his first name, but the American cyclist, Simmons is his last name, he's riding, and his father is in the actual crowd, and his father high-fives him as he's going by. I think that was incredibly cool. But you see the energy, right? And it's infectious. And on top of all that, if you're watching, you have to be thinking, look at all these people out there. They're out there for a reason. Passion, you know, whether it's the fandom, the enjoyment, they're out there for a reason. So between the parade, between the actual people, the strategy, right? When you watch these teams race and you see the breakaway, if to the casual viewer, you might be seeing, somebody's picking it up. They push the button. But pushing that button is part of their strategy, because you'll notice that for a while. And I noticed this watching this year. As I watch Tadej Pogacar during some of these stages, he was just chilling. I mean, sometimes he'd come across 40th. You know what I mean? Sometimes he wouldn't be in the top 20. but he still had that yellow jersey because his strategy was, okay, well, these stages are where I'm the strongest. We're going to work to get in position where either I win this stage, and I believe he won 5 stages this past tour. I win this stage, or from a points perspective or from a time perspective, the strategy. And I'll go back and mention, I'm trying to remember. It wasn't Lance Armstrong. I'm trying to remember the last American. Oh, I mean, it's tainted. But again, from the perspective of being able to watch this race, and I don't even know why I mentioned him. It was just going back to Simmons and cool seeing an American there, and amongst all that. But
even despite all the controversy, I mean, he did what he did.
Here's what I'll say.
He did what he did.
7 tours.
Yeah.
A lot of them were, not to get too much. A lot of those people were dirty, but anyway, the strategy behind it. I'm one of those people where, again, sometimes I've actually watched a couple crit races on TV, and just I enjoy watching cycling events. I enjoy riding, but I enjoy watching cycling events where there's strategy involved.
So with that, then you should have a new appreciation for me then, because I ride strategically.
No. Listen, let me tell you something. I love how you threw that in there. Listen, your strategy is different from this perspective. You always end up with too much left in the tank.
All right, but it's still strategy, though. You should at least appreciate my strategy, man.
I love how you threw that in there. So overall, I'll say this. For the casual fan or the casual cyclist, when next year comes around, if you're not training on Zwift or whatever, typically around that July time frame, it's typically around the 4th. I think this year it started on the 2nd. Around that July time frame, that's when the tour kicks off, whether it be for the parade, whether if you're just watching to see the fanfare. I mean, again, to see all those people out there, whether it's to see someone finishing the stage on one of those climbs, or whether it's to just see the bikes. Yeah. The Tour de France is something that I think that the casual fans can get something out of. You don't have to watch all 21 stages, but I think it's something that the casual fan should at least watch once to see what it's all about, particularly if you're into cycling, because again, the bikes are phenomenal. The athletes are phenomenal. The fanfare is incredible. FIFA World Cup happened, the World Cup was still going on as when the tour started, but you get a sense of the fandom that surrounds the World Cup, right? And you see how much hype that actually goes into it, and how from a world stage, all these people come together. The Tour de France, to me, is that World Cup.
I agree.
It's the World Cup of cycling.
And I just think it's just, since cycling isn't as popular here as it is in other countries, that's why it probably doesn't get as much, promotion as it would some of the other sports.
So, that being said, I'm going to end it like this. You got one of the largest parades, 10 miles, 170 sponsors, and a ton of swag.
Free swag, too.
You got free swag. You got some of the some of the most passionate, devoted fans out there on the actual road. You're talking millions of people. And then from a logistics perspective, and when I say logistics, I'm talking overall. I'm talking about those people behind the scenes who have to maintain. I'm talking about putting on this event that starts in one country and finishes in another. I'm talking about the number of teams that are actually involved and the number of people. It is a miracle. I'm going to use that term. It's miraculous that this event is able to be put on every year. And I think that if you have not watched any of it, I think there's something for you to get out of it. And on top of that, I mean, shout out to Gabby. I'm trying to remember Gabby's last name, but her dad used to ride with us. He rode with us when we would ride with, that other group. And he's actually gone. There is, I don't know what they actually call it, but you get the opportunity to go out to France and you can actually ride the actual route, right? He's been out there twice, and I don't know if, I think the first time one of the people he went with couldn't finish, and I think he might have been sick the second time, and I haven't talked to her this year. But to be able to experience that, I think that's one of the things on my bucket list. And I've talked about this before, and after this I'll end it. But I talked about traveling abroad, man, and just doing it. It's different there. It's different riding on the road in some of these places and some of these routes. Being able to ride some of these iconic routes, I think that that's on the bucket list, and that's one of the things where I'm excited about having the ability to do one of those Portugal tours, bike tours with whatever agency that it actually is. So there you have it. From the perspective of the casual fan, we just wanted to get some information on the basics of the Tour de France. And so until next time, keep those wheels spinning, keep those feet moving, and we'll see you on the road.